Welcome to Resilience Development in Action, where strength meets strategy and courage to help you move forward. Each week, your host, Steve Bisson, a therapist with over 2 decades of experience in the first responder community, brings you powerful conversations about resilience, growth, and healing through trauma and grief. Whether you're navigating the complex journey of grief, processing trauma, or seeking to build resilience in high-stress environments, this podcast is your trusted companion. From first responders facing daily challenges, to emergency personnel managing critical situations, to leaders carrying the weight of difficult decisions, we're here to support your journey. Through authentic interviews, expert discussions, and real-world experiences, we dive deep into the heart of human resilience. We explore crucial topics like trauma recovery, grief processing, stress management, and emotional well-being. Our conversations bridge the gap between professional insight and practical application, offering you tools and strategies that work in the real world. Join us as we create a space where healing is possible, where grief finds understanding, and where resilience becomes your foundation for growth. This is Resilience Development in Action with Steve Bisson.
Bienvenue encore une fois. Welcome once again to Resilience Development in Action. This is episode 204. If you haven't listened to episode 203, it is with Nick Johnson. I hope you go back and listen to him. He had a lot of stuff about coaching, which is, is not the typical stuff that we talk about here, but definitely something that I consider very close to the work that we do with first responders. There's the same pressures, in my opinion, on certain things. Not everything, obviously. But episode 204 is with Beth Salmo. Beth Salmo is someone, again, I met through Facebook, and she's a clinical mental health counselor who got her master's at the University of Arkansas, Fayetteville. She's a licensed professional counselor in Missouri and also in Illinois. She owns the Thin Line Counseling Service, where she specializes in working with first responders, military individuals, and their family members. She's trained and practices trauma-focused CBT, EMDR, to treat trauma, depression, and anxiety. Can't wait to have that interview. So here it is. GetFree.ai. Yes, you've heard me talk about it previously in other episodes, but I'm going to talk about it again because GetFree.ai is just a great service. Imagine being able to pay attention to your clients all the time, instead of writing notes and making sure that the note's going to sound good and how are you going to write that note and things like that. GetFree.ai liberates you from making sure that you're writing what the client is saying, because it is keeping track of what you're saying and will create, after the end of every session, a progress note. But it goes above and beyond that. Not only does it create a progress note, it also gives you suggestions for goals, gives you even a mental status if you've asked questions around that, as well as being able to write a letter for your client to know what you talked about. So that's the great thing. It saves me time, it saves me a lot of aggravation, and it just speeds up the progress note process so well. And for $99 a month, I know that that's nothing. That's worth my time. That's worth my money. The best part of it too is that if you want to go and put in the code Steve50 when you get the service, at the checkout code is Steve50, you get $50 off your first month. And if you get a whole year, you save a whole 10% for the whole year. So again, Steve50 at checkout for GetFree.ai will give you $50 off for the first month. And like I said, get a full year, get 10% off. Get freed from writing notes, get freed from always scribbling while you're talking to a client, and just paying attention to your client so they win out, you win out, everybody wins. And I think that this is the greatest thing. And if you're up to a point where you got to change the treatment plan, well, the goals are generated for you. So getfree.ai, code Steve50 to save $50 on your first month. Welcome to episode 204 of Resilience Development in Action. Still getting used to saying that word, but I'm very happy to have Beth Salmo here. I hope I pronounced it right.
You did, Salmo, yes.
All right. I try to do it right because people massacre my last name regularly. But no, Beth was in a group on Facebook that we have for first responders and clinicians, and I really wanted to get to know her. I want to get these resources out to first responders across the board. So please, listen to this because I'm going to meet people from all over the country. We all have the same goal in this group, and that's really to give the first responders a chance to get the support they need. So, Beth, welcome to Resilience Development in Action. I got to get used to
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's so nice to be here today.
I loved our chat beforehand, and yes, expletives are more than encouraged.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And if you don't relate to that, then you can obviously unsubscribe from my podcast. And if you relate to it, send 10 people my podcast. So that way you can subscribe to it. But I got to know you a little bit. Very, very fun to talk to you, knowing that you could fit in perfectly in the Boston area. But people who are listening may not know who you are. So please introduce yourself.
Yeah, so my name's Beth. I'm a licensed professional counselor, LPC, in St. Louis, Missouri metro area. And I specialize in working with first responders and military, as well as their family members.
I love the first point you just made because we forget about the families so regularly. And usually, we think about the firefighter who does a 24, but we don't think about the partner at home with, if there's kids or animals or whatever, that have to take care of during that 24 hours. So very good point. We should definitely talk about that. But, I always ask, I used to have another question I asked in my old podcast. The new question I want to ask is, what's your goal on being on this podcast? What do you want to get out of this podcast for yourself?
Yeah, I am just passionate about helping first responders and military and their family members. I've been a part of the community in one way or another for a while, and I want them to have all the resources and education that they can to take care of themselves. Because if we don't take care of this, and for just listeners, I'm pointing to my body and my mind. If we're not taking care of those. Yeah, go to YouTube. If we're not taking care of this, how can you be a tool or an instrument to help your communities and your country?
I have a friend who talks about, we don't mind a check-in from the shoulders down, but we, as first responders, they typically don't want to do the check-in from the neck up. And it's really important to do both. And certainly that's what you're pointing out. And I had a guest not too long ago who was talking about, we see human beings sees 4 to 5 regular traumatic events and significant traumatic events in their career. That's what first responders can see within 6 months to a year of their first year on the job. So we definitely need to do the checkup from the neck up really well. But
one thing I always say is you do your PT, or you're in the gym, you're taking your supplements and you're lifting, you're doing all the things. Going to psychotherapy is, it's analogous. It's an analogy for going to therapy.
You're talking to a guy who's
talking about pronunciation.
I know
how to spell it.
But it's like send me a text message, email. I'll share it with Beth.
Going to the gym for your body, going to therapy for your mind is akin to going to the gym for your body. So.
Right. And I think it's important to kind of that's why I run 2 groups for first responders. And sometimes he degenerates to some really funny stuff. And people are like, well, why, how is that therapy? I said, well, they're getting to bond with each other. I also make a conscious effort to keep different departments separate. So there's not 2 people from the same department. See, I can't even speak in the same group.
I have that effect on people.
I can't wait for I'm waiting for you to just explode, Beth, and go, fuck this, fuck that. I'm just waiting for that one. But no, I think the group I separate, if you're in, a certain town, I try not to take 2 people from the same town. So that way it's they can talk about,
right.
we talked about, geez, I mean, you can send me a message, and Beth, I can tell you off air, but I think the last few weeks we've been talking about me being a maid in a French maid outfit. And we talked about someone having ED treatment by shocking that area. So, but the people oh, how's that therapy? We bond like no one else. And I think that's so important. And for me, that's what I think was missing when I worked with first responders originally in my early career. But I wonder what brought you to the first responder world. What brought you to working with first responders? because it's not something that you just wake up one day and go, yeah, sounds like a good idea. I'm going to do that. So just want to know a little more about how you started.
Yeah, it's kind of a long history, so I'll try to be as succinct as possible. I had a fair amount of interface with first responders as a child. My dad was very sick. He had brain cancer. He survived, but because of that, he was disabled. He had a lot of health problems. So I remember like being 12 years old, having, coming home from school and finding him unconscious on the floor, 106-degree temperature, paralyzed on half his body, had urinated himself. And I knew exactly what to do. I gathered all his medications. I called 911. I very calmly told the dispatcher what was going on. So there's dispatch. And then, of course, I don't know if it's BLS or AL, EMS came. And so I dealt with them. And then, of course, police and fire. There's a 12-year-old calling. When I was 5, I called 911, giggled and hung up. So a very nice police officer in the late 80s came and had a talk with me about that. He was strict but kind.
Right.
So I've had a lot of, and that's just kind of some of my interaction. And so I've had very positive experiences. So there's that. And then when I was a senior in high school, 9/11 happens. And so that was very impactful for me. And I thought about becoming a police officer. I ended up signing up to go into the Air Force. And the 3 weeks before basic training, my father had a hematoma on his brain and had to have emergency brain surgery. So I dropped out of the Air Force. I'd gone through MEPS, had sworn in, all the things. And I told my recruiter, he's like, that I had to drop. And he's like, you got a 93 on your ASVAB. I'm like, I know, but my dad's my best friend and I need to go. And so part of me really regrets that, but part of me doesn't. Anyway, I'm being really long-winded here, but I ended
No,
up,
this is your narrative. Please go ahead. We need
yes,
to me, I always find it fascinating how people get into this field. So
yeah.
please go ahead. Don't put like I'll put you down if you need to. If that's fair for me.
Oh, great. Thank you. So about what year was it? Oh, 7, 8 years ago, I ended up dating someone who was an ATF agent. Note, I said was. We we dated for a little while on and off. Turned out he had a drinking problem, very common in this population, of course, and we ended up going separate ways for different reasons. And then I found out in 2021, I believe, August of 21, that he had died. And I didn't know why, but I have connections in both local, municipal, state, and federal law enforcement in the area. So I did some digging, found out he had drank himself to death. He was 42 years old.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. I refer to it as a suicide, a slow, protracted suicide. Because I remember one time while we were dating, he seemed very, very depressed. I mean, he told me some really, deep stuff. And I asked him one time, I said, are you having thoughts of killing yourself? Do you want to kill yourself? And he paused for a little longer than I would have liked. And he said, well, I wouldn't shoot myself. I
That's
offered him
telling.
resources. Yeah. Yeah. That ambiguity is very concerning to a clinician. So I offered resources because obviously, having dated him, I couldn't see him. And he declined. And a couple years later, he was gone. And so yeah, his girlfriend found at the time, she was the person after me, found him face down on the couch, unresponsive, and he was in the ICU for a little while, and then he expired. So
Wow.
yeah, and I had always wanted, after deciding to become a therapist, I knew I wanted to work with military and first responders. That was going to be my niche. It was really hard to get into though, because I myself am not a veteran and not a first responder. So I knew it would be hard to get into. And I had talked to him about wanting to open a private practice that worked only with this population. And he said, I fully support that, but good luck getting them through the door. And I remember him saying, you're going to have trouble getting them through the door. And so he and some other people, it wasn't just him, other people had said that too. So I decided, all right, I'll just keep doing the corporate thing, selling my soul, being treated like shit. But then, he actually died in February of that year, and I didn't find out till August.
Mm,
Because I wasn't like friends with his friends. I had never met his family or anything. And I I decided when I found out that August, I said, now's the time. If I can prevent even one more person, well, I'll call him Mike, that's not his name, but if I can prevent, even one person, one more Mike, then that's a career worth having. So that December, I opened Thin Line Counseling Services, LLC.
quite a story. And you've been going strong since. Did you jump in right away? Did you stay in the corporate world, sell out? But anyway, did you stay in the corporate world for a while, or did you just go straight to private practice?
Yeah, so I stayed in the corporate world. It's been the journey. So that was December of 2021. I mean, it was tail end. It was like December 28th, I think, is when my corporation was formed. And so I stayed in the corporate world because I needed health insurance and all the things. Did it part-time while I was building my client base. Did some, like what's it called? Like MD Live type, online platforms where I was a contractor. And then once I had built a reputation, I was just going to conferences, I was networking, I was doing ride-alongs, all the things, working with the, people I already knew in my personal life. I got to a point where I could pull the plug and give the finger to
Good.
the managed care organization I was working for, doing stuff for insurance, the devil. So,
No, that's good. And it's hard to build leaving any type of job. I joke around about the corporate world, leaving the job and just saying, fuck it, I'm going to go on my own. Yeah, we all seem like instant success and overnight success. I know people are like, oh, you grew your thing really fast. I'm like, no,
oh,
there's a lot of fear, a lot of anything else, but I don't want to do too
there are a
much of.
lot of tears. A
Yeah,
lot of what am I doing? I'm a fraud. I'm just imposter syndrome stuff and like, this isn't going to work. I'm not going to be successful. A lot of expensive mistakes, like with insurance, with different things. I mean, I built my website. I don't know anything about, I mean, you saw me trying to even just like do my
she was
earbuds for
being
this.
humble. She was so quick. She's like, why are you so slow? That's what she said.
I appreciate that. But no, I mean like I've been the marketer, I've been the advertiser, I'm the biller, I'm all the things. I don't have any employees, and the reason I don't have any employees because I totally could, and I have enough clients that I've had to refer people out to that I could add another clinician, but I want white glove service. And I don't think, and this is gonna sound, like Beth gets some hubris, but I don't think there's many people who can provide the kind of care, concern, and passion that I do. So
And I know it was an ex, but I'm still sorry for your loss, and I forgot to mention
thank
that, so I
you.
do apologize. And in all seriousness, I get it. I think that I've been called a control freak, but I also know that it takes a special someone to work with first responders and meet them where they're at and be able to deal with that stuff. I don't think a lot
Hmm.
of people. There's things you can't train, you can't teach that.
Yeah.
And I think that what you're saying is really resonates with me and a lot of the first responder treaters that I know, because you're like, how do you explain how to engage them? And sometimes having to be a little more direct. I joked around about, like,
Hmm.
you talk about being the marketer and the website designer. I think that's where the whole maid joke started in group the other day, because I was like, I'm also the maid, I'm also the
Yep.
cleaner. So I think that's where the joke started in the group. But all joking aside, I get where you're coming from, and I certainly respect
Yeah. It's a hustle for sure. And we ain't getting rich over here by any means, but I wouldn't want to do anything else. So
it. I don't want to go. I want to continue going back on the first responders, but my favorite, what I tell people is, I've seen death in my career so often, and I've seen it in my personal life so often. I know when I am on my deathbed, I'm not going to say, gee, I wish I worked more corporate and I made more money
hmm
and I invested more money or whatever. I'll be like, I work with people and I help people. Um,
Yep.
I think I always go back to that. So even if I'll never be a millionaire, I'm happy with my choices.
Exactly. Agreed.
So, you know, one of the things that's really hard for me when I work with first responders, particularly, is like they come and help. They come and see me and they want the help, but they always see like a colleague, even from other departments, and they say, "Gee, like they need help. Can I just give them your phone number?" And for every time they gave them my phone number, maybe 1 out of 10 calls me. So,
Yep.
one of the things that comes up for me is how do we get first responders to help themselves, and how to give them the resources, because it's not like I know for me, I worked at different jobs and I worked even with parolees and probationers at one point. You can give them a sheet, they're going to look at your sheet and like, that's great, push it aside. And I feel like first responders
Mhm.
do the same thing. So how do we help them effectively?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. A very important question. So I do not pretend to have all the answers, but I can tell you what's kind of worked for me is I get out in my community. And so, for example, Friday night, there was a bingo night that benefited first responders and military. There's a guy I know who has a foundation where he gets donations and pays for gym memberships and counseling for first responders and veterans. And so it was his bingo night, and I attended that and I talked to people. I'm Italian, I come by it naturally. I get the, nobody's a stranger thing from my dad. And so I just talk to people. And if I hear someone is a first responder, I ask about them and what they do. And I talk to their people who are civilians or not first responders or military. And I make myself very approachable and authentic. Who I am in my therapy room is who I am out at the bar, hanging out with people, right? So I'm not sure this is really answering your question, but
Yeah, we can
community,
come back to it, no matter.
I think community is important. So building relationships with the people in these communities. I've seen a lot of, pretty good like social media, like TikTok type things. I don't do all that stuff, but I think especially with the younger generations, it's really kind of catching them and getting their attention, and they're becoming more amenable to the thought of talking to a professional.
I've shared it on my podcast. I've had calls from the younger generation of first responders who like, hey, I'm going to get you on. Like, can I just get to know you? That way, if something happens, I can go directly to you. I don't have to tell my
Hmm.
story again. I think that's a great way to do that. Go in the community. I agree with you. I'm still, truthfully, we're like, what, 20 minutes in? I've only heard you swear like a couple of times. I'm a little disappointed in you, perfectly honest with you. But, I think that's the thing. And, the other part that you talked about is a ride along. And to me, that's
Yeah.
kind of like the key. And I'm in the Northeast, and most departments, they'll want to like, vet you a little bit. But if you want to go for ride
Hmm.
alongs, whether it's fire, police, EMT slash paramedics, ALS or BLS, depending on where you come from. Most of them, as long as you're vetted, they're going to let you come on. And what I find
Yep.
fascinating, and I don't know if that happened to you, I would work with the community. I was there for the community, but a lot of the times I ended up doing the work with the officer, the first responder of any kind, who's sitting next to me, like talking about their own shit. So I
Hmm.
don't know if you've had that experience or not, but that's certainly what I found with my ride-alongs. They were based out of a nonprofit, but I've done a lot of ride-alongs.
Well, and to add to that a little bit, a lot of therapists don't know they can do ride-alongs, and they usually think that it's just with police. But your fire department, your EMS, I mean, they'll let you do it as well. Corrections, probably not. I don't know, corrections will let you shadow,
I
but
disagree. You call a
you
correction
think
not?
so?
Oh no, I know so. You can go to
Hmm.
any like federal. I don't know, but statewide, if it's a managed, not a private one, you say, "Hey, I want to
Hmm.
volunteer to help people out." They'll let you in 2.5 seconds as long as you clear like
Oh, we
the.
had the V word. Yeah, use the V word, volunteer. But
But I
yeah.
think it's important. Like having worked in a jail for 2 years, I've worked with my COs. I've worked with those guys, and
Hmm.
when they come into my office, I know what they talk about. Like when what the police do is they arrest someone, put them in, and we forget about them in the community. They deal with them in the
Yeah.
jails. and that's a whole different animal. I always joke around that going to a jail in any part of this country is that as soon as you go past those two walls, and you're literally like you might as well be in Zambia. It's such a different
Yeah,
culture.
I worked in a mod to max men's facility in Southern Illinois for a while. It was quite the experience, but to be honest with you, I left because I had more issues with bureaucracy and with the agency that had hired me because they were contracted than I did with the inmates, with the
I mean,
offenders. I had more issues with the people I worked for than I did with the offenders.
I'll save the jail, and I'm sure you can find it if you go to research me. But when I started there in 2004 or so in the jail, the mop bucket in that particular jail had more respect than I did. So
Yep.
I get it.
Yeah, and yeah, I'll that's all I'll say. Well, it's hard to keep my mouth shut sometimes, so I'll be good. I'll
Oh,
keep it shut.
I don't really care. Like I said, you can look it up. I didn't name names, but the hardest part is to get through the door for the COs and correctional staff. But
Yeah.
once you're in, they will talk. And I think that the other
Hmm.
part too is, for therapists and the first responders, you can text me or, ask anyone. I know for a fact that you guys are like, yeah, bring them along. One of the best times ever, and it's going to sound super weird, was being in the firehouse after a medical call that was pretty significant. I'll save the details to protect the innocent, but afterwards and just processing around the table. And that was like fascinating to see what happens after a call. I observed first, and then sometimes I throw in an intervention here or there, but I just learned so much from being in that firehouse.
Yeah, yeah, that so I there was a suicide of an EMT within the past year that I responded to, and the guys I went with, we just took food, and we just sat there and we just kind of shoot the shit, say, hey, we can go in a room privately if you want and talk about what's happened. Um, and other than that, we just kind of hung out and chilled. It's just being present a lot of times is helpful, just holding that space. And just like doing podcasts, this kind of stuff. I love just getting, oh, I just lost an ear. Hold on. Um,
She didn't really lost her ear. For those who are on only
it's
audio,
my damn
she lost
hair.
the earbud. So just want to make clear that if you want, you can go check on YouTube if you want something gruesome. But
It's my
unfortunately,
hair.
I'll let her find it. She may be
I don't
stuck
know
in
where
the.
it is. Can you hear me okay? I don't know where
I
I
can
can
hear
hear
you. Can you
you.
hear me? All right. All right.
Yeah, I don't know where it went. I'll find it later.
Well, maybe it's a good place to just kind of transition to another important thing is that, I did a podcast on this not too long ago, but I'd love to hear your opinion. Is like, there's a lot of misconceptions as to what therapy is, right?
Yeah.
Some people want to get better in 3 weeks, and I typically say, okay, let me find my magic wand. But I think that there's a lot of misconceptions that occur, and that's one of them. But do you have any misconceptions and how therapy is actually for first responders?
Yeah, so many misconceptions. And one of the big ones is that your agency will find out that you're seeing me. Not true. Okay, so if you are
Okay, so
mandated,
I'm laughing, but I'm going to repeat it just for people to hear. You can go to a therapist. They don't have access to you. It's HIPAA protected. They don't cannot get that information. And I don't know, and I don't want to speak for Beth, but the last thing I want to do is take away someone's gun or license or anything else. And I'm pretty sure Beth stands in the same spot. But I think it's important to really emphasize that. There's other misconceptions I want you to bring up. But sorry, I'm going to
yep.
repeat that because too many people are afraid of losing their guns because they come to see us.
Yes. Yes. So I make it my goal to not send people inpatient as much as I can, because that would be a time you might temporarily lose the gun. Hear me
Yeah.
when I say temporarily. And there's no reason in my mind that you would lose your badge for going inpatient or going to rehab or anything like that, right? So, I mean, are there always outliers and extenuating circumstances? Yes. If you commit a crime while you're having a psychotic break or something, then yeah, that might happen. But that is such a minuscule small amount. So a good clinician is going to get someone into what we call the least restrictive level of care. So
So
usually we,
I'm just going to be very
yeah,
clear here because again, I want this may be listened to by first responders, not necessarily therapists. So when you
true.
say least restrictive, I think for them that means just a coat, and I'm going to be strapped back like this. If you want to go to YouTube
Right.
again, or what does that mean to be less restrictive? I know what it means. I'm
Yeah.
just tossing you a soft one so people can understand what we mean.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I was gonna go there, but that's okay.
Oh,
So,
so all right, you can tell me to shut up again. Like I'm
so
waiting for the expletives
shut
to
the
come out.
fuck up. No,
Exactly.
so
Thank
what
you.
that what that means is usually you're gonna start out. I'm an outpatient therapist, which is the least restrictive level of care, right? So you're gonna see me. If you're not able to function, if you get to a point that you cannot function, can't get out of bed, can't get to work, depending on the situation, we might look at something called intensive outpatient, which is where you go a couple days a week for about 4 hours a day into more intensive outpatient therapy, right? I try to keep people out of what's called partial hospitalization, and then above that is inpatient as much as possible. Only in the most dire circumstances are we looking at those options. And in that case, nobody's actually going to take your gun, but I might encourage you to talk to your significant other or a family member or friend to have them lock your gun up so you can't harm yourself if you have indicated that you plan to harm yourself or kill yourself, right?
Okay. I want to add that partial hospitalizations, I agree with you
Hmm.
wholeheartedly. However, not in a very good way. In Massachusetts, we have two places that are excellent first responder based partial hospitalizations.
Oh, that's awesome. You'll have to give me those names later.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But there's one in Westboro, Mass, and there's also one out in Winchindam, Mass. And anyway, not trying to remember. I'm sorry for on-site, but they're great, and they're specifically for first responders. And so for
Hmm.
me personally, I agree with a lot of what you said because I haven't hospitalized someone in 3 years.
Yeah,
Um,
say,
my,
yeah.
and I worked with, I was a crisis clinician. I worked in an ER and I saw what the hospitals are like. The last thing I
Hmm.
ever, if I can say it 20 more times, I would send you to
Yep.
a hospital because hospitals are not there to treat you. They're there to warehouse you and send you back in the community. And yes, if you're unhappy as a hospital, again, write to me. I don't give a fuck. But
Yep.
that's the
Same.
truth of what hospitals are.
They stabilize, they change, you swap your meds out or put you on meds, and then they say, okay, bye, good luck. And that's fucked up. I don't play that. So I'm not gonna put you, I mean, essentially you have to say, I'm going to kill myself. This is how I'm going to do it. And I have the weapon right here, right? Like, or the method, right? Like I work with you to make sure trust is so important, right? And so I want to make sure that you trust that I'm going to put your needs and your family's needs before anything else while keeping my license intact.
I think that that's exactly right. We don't like, I don't want to do that either personally. And the other
Hmm.
part that I kind of share with people is this is that I've heard homicide, I've heard suicide, I've heard wanting to overdose, I've heard suicide by
Hmm.
I heard all of that plus anything else you can imagine. I've heard in the jail about how to escape jail. I've done all
Yeah.
these things. So for me, when you bring up anything that you consider very difficult, I'll do anything in my power to keep you out of the hospital. And
Yeah.
that's how I explain it. It's like, you know, do I hear about suicide every single month of every single year in my private practice? I did. How many people have I hospitalized? I think in 12 years in my private practice, I've hospitalized one person. And
Yeah.
I had no choice. Like basically, I'm driving to a parking lot and get to the sixth floor and I'm going to jump. There's nothing I could do from there. I just can't. There's a
Yeah.
we have obligations just like you do, and I that's how I explain it to cops. So you have an obligation. If I said to you even as a therapist, I'm going to go jump off a 12-story building, you have obligations to stop me, HIPAA or not. But I
Exactly.
ultimately, hopefully, you would want to talk me out of it, so I don't even get there. But if I can't, you can't, you do what you need to do. So I always kind of like reverse role it so they can understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah, so that's one misconception. And another one is that like if you use insurance, your boss will find out, right? Or your agency will find out. That's not how that works. But if you're really, really concerned about that, you can always private pay, and most first responder therapists like myself will do sliding scale private pay to meet your budget. So I want people to know they have options as well, like if that's something you're really unsure about. Another misconception, this one is a big one, goes along with stigma, is that if you go to counseling, you're a pussy or you're crazy. It ain't true.
Yep.
I can tell you as a female who is straight and loves men, I think it makes you strong and admirable when you talk about your feelings and ask for help. And I think most women would tell you that, therapist or not. I think most women would say the fact that you're talking about your feelings and asking for help and saying, I'm not Batman, I am human, is really brave and admirable.
Let me just add one thing about that. Not only do your partners typically find that attractive, good partners will not ask you the content of what you talked about.
Yeah.
I kind of remind them like you're not obligated. You want to share it, share. But if you don't want to share, don't share. You don't have to do any of that. And that's another misconception sometimes is like, well, my partner told me to go to therapy or my chief told me to go. I got to tell him what's happening. Hell no. You don't even need to tell him
Nope.
shit and keep it to yourself. And it's between you and your therapist. And that's what I tell people. My conversation with you is private. And so that's another good one too. Do you have any misconceptions that you think we need to talk about?
I mean that those are, some major ones. Just that like so I'm a certified employee assistance professional, so EAP, and all I can do if you're mandated, all I can do if your chief or someone asks, "Hey, what'd you guys talk about? Is he okay? Blah blah. She okay?" All I can say is they showed up and participated. That's it. And that is all I will say. I will say nothing more.
That's my standard letter, by the way. Clients
Yeah.
showed up and participated on all sessions.
Yep,
And
that's it.
I don't need to give any content. The only people that may ask for content are for goals only, and that's for insurance companies. And I tell people my goals sometimes they get pissy that I'm a vague goal type of person, but
Hmm.
ultimately they don't even know if you're hitting the goals or not. Just want to know we have goals.
Yep.
So, I think that there's so many misconceptions, but I also want to be respectful of both our times here. But
Hmm.
the last one that I really want to mention is what will how is that going to impact any promotions in the future? And the answer
Ah,
is, and the answer is like in Massachusetts right now, where, again, I'm not going to be popular, but there is a little group now that are trying to, well, if he's mentally, he has a mental health issue, that could be a reason to dismiss him from the force. We're working on that. We have a great psychiatrist on that board right now working on that. But ultimately, most states don't have that, and you're not going to be held from a promotion for going to therapy. I don't know if
hmm.
that's your experience, but that's certainly
Yeah, I haven't had that come up, but I mean, I agree with you.
mine. I wanted to throw that one in. But more importantly, I want to hear more about, like I know you have a bunch of resources. We're going to share them after this, but can you talk a little bit more about what you want to promote and what you want to talk about here?
Yep. So I'm born and raised in Missouri, and in Missouri, we have something that's been around since 2018. That's fantastic. That just keeps growing. And we're kind of a benchmark, and I really hope to see this catch on in other states called the Missouri First Responder Provider Network. We have an app, we have a website. So what it is we are clinicians who are vetted by a board associated with the Missouri Behavioral Health Council. And there's on this board, there is a psychiatrist, there are other therapists, there are representatives of different state, municipal, local agencies, and they vet us to make sure we're culturally competent. So we go through a process, culturally competent to work with first responders. And we, when somebody's in need, an email goes out to all of us who have been vetted saying, no identifying details other than, law enforcement or EMS, fire, whatever, trauma, no identifying details other than that in this part of the state. Who is available to see this person? So for example, one of these emails went out, today's April 1st. I think it went out like March 27th or 28th or something. I responded to it. Within 24 hours, I was on the phone with the first responder and I saw him yesterday. Yesterday was Monday. So the email went out, I think like Thursday. I saw him Monday. He had basically given up because the wait list for every therapist he had contacted who was not culturally competent on top of it was like weeks to months. I had him in within a couple days. So their website is MO for Missouri, MOF, like Foxtrot, R Romeo, P Papa, and November.com. MoFRPN.com. I would love to see states across the nation work with us to model what we're doing. We also have some grant money that we're using to help people pay for copays or deductibles, different things, because we do not want any barrier, financial or otherwise, to get in the way of you getting the help that you have earned and deserve.
MOFRPN.com. I don't know my police alphabet as well as you do, so I'm going to.
Oh, that's actually military.
Military. I still don't know my alphabet really well. I just knew Oscar. But anyway, yes, I will put that in the show notes. I hope people do that. Would love to hear from other states in regards to that, including I've worked with Florida on that. Washington has a program like that too. And definitely I'm working on something in the state of Massachusetts with a bunch of other great people. So would love to hear from them. And obviously, Beth, it was too short. Hopefully we can do this one more time or a couple more times. It'd be great maybe even to get people from different states and just sit together and record it for a podcast and let people know about all these great resources.
Can I also plug my website?
No, we're out of time. I'm sorry. I'm going to cut off.
Oh, so it's www.tlc, which stands for Thin Line Counseling, -help, HELP.com, TLC-help.com. So if you want to reach out to me, if you have any questions, even if you're not in Missouri and Illinois, I'm licensed in both states. Even if you're not in those states and you're just looking to get some information, I'm happy to help you.
I will put that also in the show notes because that's really important to have. So, Beth, I want to thank you. If there's anything else you want to plug, please do. But I encourage you to go to our website. I encourage you to go to MOFRPN.com. And I really hope I have you back.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure to be on the show, and everybody take care of yourselves and be well.
Well, this completes episode 204. Thank you so much, Beth. And I hope you join us for episode 205.
Please like, subscribe, and follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. If you're struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor for consultation. If you are in a mental health crisis, call 988 for assistance. This number is available in the United States and Canada.